Hey everybody, welcome to 3D6 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k, the state of the game, and community news. I am your host, Chris Vo, and joining me tonight is Kevin Lieb. I think my audio is bad. Hold on. Yes, it was. All right, Kevin, reintroduce yourself.
Howdy, howdy.
There we go. And Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hello.
All right, so tonight's episode, we're on episode 35, 6 books for 1 army. We are streaming live on Twitch at twitch/3d6charge every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So the big bits of, well, before we get into tonight's topic, Ben, I believe there is something that you wanted to announce.
There is, and for this announcement, I was hoping my camera would be working, but it's not for all right, well, we'll figure that out in a second. Yes, so I'm going to be TOing a 40k event. It's going to be virtual, of course, because of the realities of COVID, for a store called Revive Collectibles. They're kind enough to let us advertise our podcast on their website, so we're giving them a bit of advertisement back. It's going to be, 3-round event, RTT style, although it's not going to be an official ITC event. We're keeping it pretty casual because this is going to be a lot of people's first 9th edition 40k event, unless they've played other virtual events, because for the most part 9th edition has been just during the age of COVID. So it's going to be on April 10th. Entry is going to be $15, but everything that goes in is going to go out as prize support. There will be a painting award. If you play an army that you own built and painted, you can post a picture of it to either the store social media page, or you can email it to me, because I'm going to be judging the event, to be eligible for painting prizes. And the goal is just have a good time, play some 40k, get ready for vaccines to roll out, and start actually playing as a group. So feel free if you're interested in the event. Full details for the event are gonna be out this Saturday. But the only thing that's gonna be in that announcement that's not already here is just the exact terrain setups and missions for the 3 rounds. If you are interested in the event, feel free to Facebook message either the store or myself if you're friends with me on Facebook, or email the store, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
All right, very cool. I'm looking forward to it.
I
haven't done an event since 9th edition started. I've only just been playing, games in my living room or, on TTS. I
think most of us have, because, safety. So we're just trying to, start small and see where it goes.
Yeah, very cool. So with that, are these codex? All right, so this latest book, The War of Tardon.
Yeah,
it has some supplements in it, and then I think it has some Armies of Renown in it. Is that book going to be out in time for this event?
Oh, you know what? It might be. When does this book drop?
I mean, they announced it this week, so I imagine it goes on pre-order next week, right?
That is my understanding.
Yeah, so yeah, it would be.
So it would probably be available on April 3rd.
Yeah, so I'm going to do list submission 3 days before the event, and because it's not, hyper competitive event, if your rules are out 3 days before the event, that's fine. If you have the physical book 3 days before the event, you can submit a list with using that book. That's fine. So yeah, should be that book should be legal. Dark Eldar Codex will probably or should be out by then too. So if you want to run that army, that'll be out.
Awesome. Yeah, and I really like how you're going to be doing if you're eligible for a best painted award, because so much of this hobby is spent at a painting desk and not actually playing. I know a lot of my motivation for painting is getting the models on the tabletop, and you can't do that right now. So it's nice to reward those who, kept the faith, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's a TTS event, so people want to run an army they don't own. That's fine. It's cool. It sounds like fun. But the people who are Kevin, sitting at home, hobbying, want to play an army that they own, like, yeah, they should be rewarded for doing that, especially if the army looks great.
Absolutely.
There's a unit I want to add, and I need to go to GameStore to buy it now.
So let's talk about this book. So this book has two things in it. It has Codex supplements and Armies of Renown. Let's start off with Codex supplements because we all know what those are. Although traditionally the way Codex supplements have worked is if you play Space Marines, you get a Codex supplement. And if you don't, you get to be sad about them. And now GW has said, well, actually, hang on, you can just put a Codex supplement in any Codex because, you just take a chapter tactic in that, or, Red Guard Regiment, chapter tactic, Cult Obsession, whatever, a sub-faction trait. And you say, all right, if your detachment has a sub-faction trait, here's a book, or in this case, a chapter of a book. Just get access to these rules. What do you guys think about that?
So, real quick, just to hit up the ones we're getting Codex Supplement Metallica, Codex Supplement House Raven, and Codex Supplement Cult of Strife. Now, what's important to note, it's one of each of the sub chapters for these books. It's not like Space Marines where literally every single one of their chapters has a Codex Supplement associated with it. We don't know if that's going to be the end goal, that every sub chapter is getting a supplement. That's going to be a lot of books if it is, but I have a feeling it won't be.
Yeah, that's not happening.
But let's say it is only one. It's going to make armies feel less diverse because, like, you could play with the chapter that has one stratagem and one relic in that, or you could play with the one that has a page and a half of stratagems and a full page of warlord traits. I'm interested, I'm kind of concerned because I feel like it might reduce diversity a little bit.
Yeah. Let's like start from the top about these codexes. The first one is going to be the easiest one to talk about. Cult of Strife. I'm saying start from the top, like there's an order, and I'm going in a different order than Kevin even mentioned them in. Cult of Strife is going to be very easy to talk about because it's that is the witch cult that Lilith Haruspex is from, or Hesperix. Hesperix. There we go. Yeah, Haruspex is the Tyranid unit. Yeah, it's the one that Lilith is from. Because that book's done out, it's hard to say if that's a faction that needs help or not. Lilith's in it, so Lilith's really good. Traditionally, we've seen a little bit of, I think, her rules, and she's like kind of nonsense in melee. It's unclear if her faction is going to need extra help. That being said, I think for Drakari specifically, it's kind of interesting because you're probably going to need to bring a mono detachment of her cult, and you're kind of encouraged to bring like these like weird like triple detachments for the raiding party rule. So if you choose to bring just a detachment of Cult of Strife, then you're gonna have to bring 3 patrols if you want to bring a bit of everything from the book. So that's an interesting decision point there, right? It's making you make a decision. It's not just like, oh yeah, you just bring that one. It's like, no, if you want to bring this one, you are giving something up. You're giving up the raiding party detachment. For those of you who don't know, that's something they spoiled, where if you bring a detachment that has 1 HQ from each of the 3 Drakari like super factions, the witches, the cults, and the cabals, and then you also have 1 unit of, I think, troops from each of them, then you're allowed to bring warlord traits and relics from any of the factions in like a combination that you want. Because you need 1 of the 3 each HQ, that means you need to be bringing a battalion. And their other thing is, I believe if all of their detachments are patrols, those patrols are free. But once you start bringing like battalions and stuff, then you start like spending, which is interesting. So you are making a decision there. What do you guys feel about that one?
Once again, this goes back to my concern. If the decision is you're always supposed to take Cult of Strife, then they've done a disservice to the Codex.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like historically the Yukari Codex has always had so many options and a lot of flexibility that the addition of a supplement into that fold doesn't really tip the balance too much in like that particular witch cult's favor. Whereas if you're looking at something like, say, House Raven for Imperial Knights, look, the Imperial Knights book is like one of the leanest books in terms of like actual rules that exist in 40K right now. It's like what, like 5 data sheets?
They have like actual pages and pages of relics and stratagems. They have a huge number of rules. The issue is that none of them work in the edition. They just like can't play the missions.
Right. So, if you want to illustrate if how supplements are going to work or not work in favor of an army, you got to look at the differences between like how is it going to work for Drukhari and how is it going to work for knights. Now, House Raven was already like historically like a powerful faction, at least in 8th edition. If
The
you
best. It's not close. It's the best.
yeah, it was the best. And now we're taking what is effectively like a dead codex because half of their rules don't really apply to 8th edition anymore. And we're saying, hey, look at this house. They're getting a codex supplement. They're getting new rules written explicitly for 9th edition in mind. Also, until the new codex comes out for knights, they're the only house that has it. Which means that if you're running knights, like, I'm willing to bet, like, 9-1 odds you're going to be playing House Raven.
Yeah. Even in their kind of like sorry state, Ben and I have been theorizing Raven lists, mainly because they have some good utility stratagems that came out of War of the Engine War.
Yeah, and there's a warlord trait that combos with their unique stratagem on Knight Castellans that really, really push them.
Right.
So they're already. I have mixed feelings about this one because it's like, all right, like we already like Chaos Knights are unplayable. Imperial Knights are almost unplayable, with House Raven being the only thing like keeping them anywhere in like the realm of like a reasonable list. And then they're like, all right, let's buff House Raven. It's like, man, so we're going back to Kevin's issue of like every Knight army is just going to be a House Raven list, and it's not going to be close. They're already the best faction. Now they're getting buffs. At the same time, it's hard to argue with buffing the Knight Codex, right? Like, if you want to buff the Knight Codex, like, yeah, do that. That book's awful.
Yeah, I guess like a different way to frame it, and like and I can accept it a little bit more with books, factions that haven't had their codex yet. It's like this is kind of like an index for them. This is kind of like an index update. This is kind of like what's going to keep them relevant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, for now, play Raven. When the book comes out, we'll see what happens.
Right. So in that regard, it's great because you can put the models on the table and they're going to feel better again.
So let's talk about the last one, which is Metallica, which is a faction for AdMech. All right, so anyone know what Metallica does?
Not a clue.
Yeah, exactly. Metallica is like vying for worst worlds. Like every Forge world in AdMech has like either an interesting chapter tactic or an interesting stratagem, or your Mars and you have an interesting named character and an interesting stratagem. And the Metallica is when you advance, you can shoot your rapid fire weapons like assault weapons, but they just become assault weapons. They don't like still double tap in half range.
Yeah,
and
so for my response of not a clue, I want to also specify that I'm not unfamiliar with AdMech. Like, I don't play the army, yes. I don't own the codex, but I'm not unfamiliar with them. I know what Mars does, I know what Styges does, I know what Ryza does. Fucking nobody plays Metallica.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, the chapter tactic is basically your Skitarii infantry can advance and shoot their weapons with no penalty, and can shoot rapid fire weapons with no penalty. This is basically useless because the Skitarii are just like not what the army is about. You bring them to score points. They're not there to kill your opponent. And then their unique stratagem is people within 6 inches of a unit get -1 on leadership. They don't do anything. So I'm cool with them getting a supplement. Because this will bring diversity, right? We're seeing a lot of AdMech armies are kind of the same. Where it's just like, yeah, you bring Mars, you bring Call, you bring something to abuse Wrath of Mars with. And there's no Mars options too. There's like some like custom Forge worlds, with like the Breacher like arc weapon spam. Like there's a lot of interesting AdMech lists, but none of them are Metallicas. Like this just like makes the list. This just makes the things you can do like more diverse, and like that's cool.
Yeah, I like that. If it's an underrepresented sub faction of an army, and they want to give them more rules, I'm all for it. Because again, what we want to see is list diversity.
Yeah.
And this is like the opposite problem of what we're gonna see for House Raven, where it's gonna like we don't know anything about the House Raven supplement. I can already tell you that it's gonna be the only viable house.
It already is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what I will say about the Metallica one, though, is that we are getting a new AdMech book soon, because we're already seeing AdMech kits getting reboxed. We haven't gotten an official announcement of it yet, but like, we know, like, we already have seen Electro Priest's new stats coming out. Things are getting pulled off shelves. Like, there's an AdMech book incoming. So I'm going to pose this question to you guys. How do you guys feel about these codex supplements coming out, but like for factions that are like imminently getting new codexes? Like 2 of the 3 are just like new
So
books.
I want to say I'm okay with it, but the truth of the matter is, like, we've seen this happen in the past where an army will have its codex and then they'll get like a campaign book with new rules, but then their new codex comes out like maybe like 3 months later, and then half of the shit that was in the campaign book that made the army good again, it got stripped out. I think pretty sure we saw that with, like, I want to say Blood Angels. But it's one of those things where, like, these books take so long, like, in the life cycle to, like, get written up, get printed, get shipped, get stored in warehouses, get distributed, that, like, there is some sort of, like, project board at GW headquarters that illustrates all of this stuff out. So, like, they know in advance, like, what's releasing and when, and then they decide to basically write rules that'll be valid for 3 months, which doesn't make anybody feel good when they buy a codex, buy the campaign book, and then buy the new codex, which is really just a reprint of the old codex. And then also there's 3 more, like, Psychic Awakening books that you need to buy for your army. Oh, but then also the new codex is coming out in 6 months after that. That's supposedly rolling everything into one.
So I literally just experienced this with Daughters of Cain. There's a they have this, like, we're gonna call it the AOS version of Psychic Awakening coming out, and the book was called Marathi. She's the leader of the Daughters of Cain. Her art is on the book. I went and bought the book. It had 2 new sub chapters and some updated data sheets in it. Great. Added some diversity. 3 months later, their new book is out that has that rolled into it, and it's not even the stuff that was in the Psychic Awakening wasn't even exactly reprinted. It's just like, what? Why were these within 3 months of each other? And you could say COVID maybe was supposed to be 6 months, but even like 6 months, like, why?
Yeah, and I think it's with these books, for me, the thing that kind of makes me scratch my head is that chat saying that it seems like a COVID thing. We know that COVID has bumped codex releases back out, which means that, yeah, that codex is probably supposed to be dropping like with this book. So like this book is actually just dropping. It's supposed to have like dropped with other books that you need to have rules for it, which the big complaint I've seen, and that I could feel too, is that GW basically ripped a chapter out of each of these codexes and just put it in a different book.
That's really what it feels like.
Codex supplements, and they're just like, here, like your Drakari book, like the Drakari book and this book are dropping on this within the same week of each other, right? It's either the same week or within 1 week of each other.
Pretty sure it's the same day.
Yeah, it's probably the same day. Like, why could the Drakari rules not have just been in the Drakari book? It's because they wanted you to buy 2 books, and like there's not really another explanation there. That stinks. That just doesn't feel good.
It feels bad when what they should really be using the campaign books for is, like, in between codex releases. That's when it feels good. Like when Thousand Suns got their supplement, quote unquote, in Psychic Awakening. That felt really good for us Thousand Sun players.
Yeah, for sure. Because like the codex had dropped like almost a year ago, more than that. And it was like, yeah, this is just like new rules, and it doesn't feel like it got cookie cuttered out of anything. It's just new rules, and those are still the latest rules Thousand Sons have had. It's not like it got invalidated a couple months later. Like, that was an excellent supplement.
Yeah, you know what this Jakari supplement feels like to me? It feels like on disc DLC for video games.
Yeah, the Raven stuff in this book, great. Like, we don't really know when the Knight's coming out. We could be, this Raven thing could be with us for a while before the Knights come out. Like, that's perfectly appropriate. The idea of the Codex supplements is interesting. I don't hate the idea of it, although I do share Kevin's concern of, like, army diversity. Like, if one of your factions has like 3 rules, the other one has 35, like, why am I ever picking the one with 3? Unless those 3 are just like actually that good. But it just feels like a money grab, and I don't like it.
It feels like a money grab, but the thing that's frustrating about it is that they could so very easily not feel like a money grab if they did it the right way. Because, yeah, you can't expect the full codex rewrite every year. That's not feasible. That's not tenable. But if you want to release a codex and then, like, in the pipeline, plan for, like, in 6 months, let's see where the army is, and write a supplement or campaign book to give them, a little something new, like a year after their codex release. That would feel great.
Yeah.
But instead, you feel like you're getting nickel and dimed with on-disc DLC.
Yeah, for sure. So outside of, we don't like how they're releasing these things for armies that are getting books at the same time. How do we feel about just like the general idea of, like, we are going to release codex supplements for books, not necessarily the whole every faction of the book, just like one faction, maybe 2 factions? Like, how does that idea sit with us?
I have some. It's funny. I have some 10th edition concerns. So, a supplement is a supplement. Like 9th edition came out and the Ultramarine supplement didn't get invalidated. But you know what did get invalidated? Vigilus. Vigilus is gone. So we go back to my Gene Circle thing where they had a release alongside, like, very soon after, and Aberrants, like, had a lot of their powerful rules in the Vigilus book, and it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So now those units are just like, it's clear that they were designed with that specialist attachment in mind, and it's just gone. And is that going to happen with these campaign books? Maybe not, because they're a supplement, but, like, I'd be more concerned about that happening because it's in the campaign book.
Yeah, right. I guess that almost feels like that could be the thing, right? Is, oh man, maybe if supplements are a mistake, then it does make the sense to print them in a different book, because you can always just be like, oh goodness, this book isn't working. All right, like 9.5 edition, quick, these books aren't allowed. Like, we need to fix the problem we made. And that's, like, also concerning, right? Like, for like a rules perspective. Like, I don't know. Shall we talk about the second part of this book?
The Armies of Renown.
Yeah. So, want to run us through what that looks like?
Yeah.
Formation.
So,
I'm kidding.
Armies of Renown. Any of you played, like, before 8th edition? You might be familiar with formations. And formations, basically, all right. So, like, formations were it's totally broken. But it was dumb shit like, hey, if you build your army in a certain way, you can take all of these other units for free. Now, Armies of Renown are kind of along the same lines of that, where it encourages you to build your army in a certain way. Now, you don't get, like, 90 Razorbacks for free anymore, which is good, because that was insane. But
yeah.
you get cool things, like a special psychic discipline, a special stratagem if you build your army a certain way.
It's multiple stratagems.
Yeah, multiple stratagems.
Warlord traits,
rules. It's basically a sub-faction within a sub-faction. So
why am I not just, like, taking every army as an Army of Renown?
Because there's only 3 of them.
But, like, what? But, like, if I'm playing, so Death Guard is an Army of Renown. All right. So Death Guard is an Army of Renown. Like, why don't I just make every Death Guard list, right? This Army of Renown?
Because the the way that you build the army is actually quite restrictive. But the focus is to like really make those core units that you can bring very powerful. So if you bring the Terminus Est Assault Force, which is the Army of Renown for the Death Guard, you can't bring any vehicles, 0 vehicles. And if there's any Plague Company units, they got to be from the Harbingers. But in exchange for that, anything that an army-wide rule for that any bubonic Astartes units that you put into reserves, they don't come onto the board as reserves. They just deep strike using normal deep strike rules. So you can take your brick of like 20 Plague Marines. Well, it'll be 10. But instead of having to put them within like 6 inches of the board edge, you just deep strike them right in the middle of the board if you really want to. They also get this other strategy. One of the stratagems they get is called Callous Disregard. It's 2 CP. Use it in the shooting phase, and basically you can use it to shoot into combat, as long as the thing that's in combat is in combat with like your Poxwalkers or Plague Followers,
which is cultists. Yeah. So for those who don't know, the Terminus Est is Typhus's flagship. That's so what's happening there is you're putting your Plague Marines on teleport platforms in the flagship, and it's teleporting them into combat. The downside of taking this is that you can't bring vehicles, and like if we've all looked at like Plague Marine vehicles, they're really good. Like we've seen Plague Burst Crawlers have shown up in pretty much every winning list for Death Guard. So that's a real hit. And then you also need to take the Harbingers, which has shown up in, I believe, none of the winning lists because it's fighting for worst Plague Company, in my opinion. But that's not saying that this is bad, because those are 2 big downsides. But then you're getting a new Psychic Discipline, and it's a May. It's not you must use this new Psychic Discipline. You can generate your powers from the Fester Discipline, and it doesn't even say like must or like when choosing psychic powers you can take all of them from the Fester or all of them from the other one. It just says you can, which makes me think that you can probably like have psychers that like with like one from one discipline and one from another.
I'm gonna wait until we get the actual book in front of us to.
That's fair.
That's the type of shorthand I would say is reasonable to be in a GW article.
That's fair. It's also going to depend is the Fester Discipline good? They've shown us 1 power from it. It's like pretty good. But the normal Plague Discipline is like kind of insane. So you need to bring a lot of psychers before that becomes like super interesting. More importantly, you get what's probably a page of stratagems and some number of relics. We're not sure exactly how many relics, but yeah, this is an interesting design space.
So I think when designed correctly, there's no issue here. Like, I'm reading this one, as we said, not taking vehicles, taking the worst company, probably means you could add some free passive rules to the army and give them some extra stratagems without it breaking. My concern,
kind of need it.
Right. Right now, there's no mention of the detachment itself costing points to take this detachment, and I'm kind of concerned because I think that's something they wanted to introduce. Even if it's a small amount, like 10, 20 points, like it doesn't have to be a huge amount. I just want there to be an idea that there's a points associated with it, because if they ever introduce one that's like broken, let's say, rather than having to nerf the units that go in it, because let's say this made Plague Marines broken. Like, let's just say this broke Plague Marines for some reason. We have no evidence of that, but let's just say it did. Well, what do? Do you nerf Plague Marines and thus every other Death Guard list is getting hit because of this one detachment? No, I'd like it so that the detachment itself could get hit by like increasing in point cost. But I've seen no mention of that. It's not guaranteed not there, but I've seen no comment on it, so I don't think it is. And I think that's bad.
Yeah. And the chat is saying the restrictions are for the army, not for the detachment. Yeah, that's true. If you choose to bring an Army of Renown, it is your army. It's not a specialist attachment where you're like, oh yeah, the specialist attachment is like going to be this thing, and I'll do something else. Or like, no, your whole army must be following these restrictions. So there's no way to cheat. You can't like spend command points to bring a vehicle and somehow like that's it. You're this is it. This is your list.
Oh my god, how awesome would it be to bring like a battalion Terminus assault force and then just like a spearhead of Plague Burst crawlers.
Yeah, well, they
That'd
know
be great.
exactly
But,
what people
I mean,
do.
They foresaw that.
They
So it explicitly says, quote unquote, your army cannot include any units with the vehicle keyword. Army, not detachment.
I want to say that I love this. For the exact this fixes almost all of my issues I had with specialist attachments. Like for example, like that orc shock attack gun, like the relic orc shock attack gun. Like, do you know what that specialist attachment was specializing in?
Not a clue.
Things go fast, right?
No, but like it was the orc walkers, the deaths. None of us, but like, why does that matter? Like, it doesn't. Like the
I don't think I saw
a
a single dreadnought or Killican on the board.
Yeah, they're just like, all right, I'm taking attachment. I put the gun on the guy. I swear this attachment specializing in death treads. Look at all of my 0 death treads. Same thing with the relic gun for like the guard commander, where they're like, I'm going to take this specialist attachment for tank commanders or for tanks. One, maybe 2 Leman Russes in it. Obviously, it's a specialist Leman Rust attachment.
That was a really good gun.
Like, yeah, like the gun was insane. So you just like spent the command point for it, and then you wouldn't ever bring like an actual Leman Russ. You just like bring a commander or 2, sometimes 3 if you were really going in on them. And this kind of fixes that issue where you're just like, if I want like the sweet specialist relic for my tank commander or the sweet specialist, like I wouldn't be surprised if we see that shock attack gun come back. But like, all right, you want to bring that shock attack gun? Well, that was like a real cost. Like you can't you have to bring death dreads as your troops. There's like something stupid. Rather than just like, yeah, build your army however you want. Also, here's an excellent silly thing. It opens up a lot of design space, and I think that's good for the game. Putting army restrictions to get nice things is neat, rather than just like saying, well, it has to be in a different attachment. So if you are willing to spend enough command points, you can kind of just get around it.
Right. In our podcast from 2 weeks ago, I brought up the AOS, like you pick a certain general and you get certain things as troops. If we were to see something like that here, this is more of a restriction than just having something be your general. So I like that. But I guess the point is like, the reason why I want to associate points with it, even if it's a small amount, is like people don't mind points changes. Obviously no one's super happy when there are things go up in points, but it's like that's the understanding. You kind of like, everyone knows there's going to be a chapter approved every 6 months, every year, depending on the time frame, and that's just like an expected part. You know what people don't like is when their units just like get an errata to a balance level errata, like. Oh. I don't know, like I think about like cultists getting like 5 different erratas, and now they're both went up in points and are functionally bad. It's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean like the points thing, like I look at points as like going to a casino almost, because like, yeah, you might luck out in chapter approve and you might get a points cut, but you also have to understand that sometimes you're gonna lose that game, and that's just the way that Warhammer goes. Points go up, points go down.
Yeah, and the best units, like, they know what they did, they deserve it. And yeah, that's fair. And I almost like want them to, like, I want these things initially to be cheap, if not free, because the restrictions for this one and the next one that we'll talk about in a second are crippling. Like, these restrictions are truly crippling. And if you're just like, here's these restrictions, build an army, that army would be bad, like just actually bad. And it's reasonable that they get, big bonuses for those restrictions. Like, obviously any restriction makes your army worse. Taking 2 really huge ones, right? You must play the worst play company or one of the worst play companies. You can't play like the best fire support in your book. Like, oh, okay, well, like, you got to give me something, right? Deep striking plague marines is like fine. They'll presumably have like more stuff, and it's not worth, I think, like guesstimating like what they'll have. But I do also agree with Kevin that there needs to be some variable cost in here that's just like something that GW can point out and be like, that's a bigger number now if that thing becomes a problem, rather than just being like, well, time to like do the night thing where like I own a Knight Codex, but man, I could just play with the Knight FAQ because all of the stratagems are just reprinted in there. Their words are all different. Like they all just do different things at different costs.
Right.
Can you bring Mortarion with the assault force?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, he's not right. He's not a vehicle. Like, what's
he's not a vehicle. I was just wondering it like. I mean, like fluff wise, there's a lot of enmity between Typhus and Mortarion.
There might be more restrictions that they didn't print here, but if it's just these two restrictions, yeah, he does not have the Play Company keyword. And it's not all your models must be Play Company Harbingers. Is if they have Play Company, they must be Harbingers. So yeah, I mean, as of now, you could bring him.
All right.
All right, let's talk about the next one. So the next specialist attachment is for AdMech. Kevin, wanna run us through this one?
Okay. The mechanic is Defense Force. You can't include any Skitarii units, and your Breachers, Destroyers, Servitors, and Castellan robots get the Extremist Sentinel Protocols ability. The first one part of it is each time a range attack is allocated to a model in this unit, if this unit is wholly within its controller's deployment zone, or if every model in this unit is within range of an objective marker, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack to a minimum of 1. It then goes on to mention hold steady and set to defend, but it feels like those are the generic rules, so I might be missing something as to what we're actually getting out of that.
If you hold steady, then until the end of the phase, any Overwatch attacks made by the models in this unit scores hits on an unmodified 5 up.
Yeah, those are just the same rules.
I think you can only hold steady once normally, so if you can somehow shoot Overwatch more than once, I'm not really sure how that's different. The sets defend one is different though. Until the end of the phase, it cannot fire Overwatch, but until the end of the next fight phase, every time a model makes a melee attack, add 1 to a hit roll. So it's going to get +1 to hit this fight phase and the next fight phase.
No, the next fight phase would be
until the end of. Oh no, you're so right because that.
So.
Yeah, no, you're right.
We
can
ignore that though.
I don't know what that does.
That though. I don't know why it's there.
They reprinted something.
But this
Well,
the first part of it is amazing.
No, I got it. Actually, wait, hang on. The sets defend one, that would stack with the normal sets defend bonus, right? And one of their melee weapon options is actually one of the Cataphrine melee weapon options is -1 to hit. So there you go. If you charge into them, they're getting hit on 3s even instead of 5s.
Interesting. I can't imagine that stacks and the hold steady one stacks though. That doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know what the hold steady one's doing. Yeah.
Okay.
It's text.
Sure.
More importantly, yeah, if you shoot at them in their controller's deployment zone, -1, they're disgustingly resilient.
And that's amazing because these models, as of right now, we're not pointed with getting that ability. And we already have seen these types of armies be like a reasonable thing. Like I've seen the I think it was 27 Cataphan Breacher destroyer list. I played against that on Battle Scribe.
Do they have plasma or the arc?
Plasma.
Those are destroyers.
Destroyers, yeah. I've already played against this list, and I like it. Already felt like pretty good. I felt like it was maybe ever so slightly missing out on some durability, and this is getting it all back.
I actually think that this detachment's really gonna struggle to win games. So your army cannot include Skitarii units is a line of text that has a lot more oomph behind it than it appears. So they've mentioned Cataphrine Breachers, Cataphrine Destroyers, Servitors, and Castellan robots. So there's those units, and there are characters, and that's it. That's everything you're allowed to put in your army. Every other model in the book has the Scutari keyword. You can't bring any of the jetpack guys. You can't bring your cavalry. You can't bring normal infantry. You can't bring the airplanes. You can't bring tanks. You have some HQs and some breachers and destroyers and stellar robots.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I was just thinking just like the Rangers and the Vanguard.
No, everything's got the Scutari keyword. So your whole army moves 6 inches. Most of it has penalties to advance rolls. None of it can advance and shoot or advance and do anything. They only come in huge blobs. Like your cheapest unit is 100 points, other than your servitors, which you're gonna probably have to bring to like do stuff. Your army is really clunky if you do this. Don't get me wrong, there's some power here, but like you're asking the question, you're not providing answers. You're going, can you deal with this firepower and this durability? I have no tricks. I'm going to shoot you if I can see you, and I move real slow.
Interesting.
Speaking of moving slow, one of their stratagems lets them pick a piece of terrain and give it +2 on saves instead of +1. If you're in it, which is interesting. So they can really castle up and be like one of the best castles in the game. Castle doesn't always win games of 9th edition, so I wouldn't be shocked to see this list do well. I hope this list doesn't end up being tier 1, just because I think that could lead to some really boring games of just like I've already put together a couple lists on Battlescribe. I think the robots are probably just not good right now, which just means you're looking at 50 destroyers. This list is like 50 destroyers and 2 units of servitors and some characters. Like that's it. You can't put anything else in your army.
Yeah, that just sounds really boring.
Correct. I have no interest in playing with it. Playing against it once or twice could be interesting, but it really depends on what you're bringing.
So one thing to note, as opposed to the other detachment, there's no mention here that you have to just play Adeptus Mechanicus.
That's super true. I totally missed that.
So these seem like rock solid troops. These seem like you're bringing shooting Terminators for troops. Like that's what you're getting when you're bringing this detachment.
Oh no, they're not Terminators. They are Centurions. They're T5 and they have 2 up armor.
Right. Sure.
Well, they have 3 up armor, but you're going to give them cover return because you're a monster.
Right. The point I'm bringing here is they are. You could like mix and match this. You could bring like a knight. You could bring like a sister. I guess sisters wouldn't add that much, right? There's a whole bunch of utility you could add that.
I do think sisters add a lot, right? If you bring like the sister scout units.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Sorry, whenever I think of sisters, I think of melted guns, and they already kind of have the melted guns. Like
that's super fair. Yeah, you wouldn't bring the melted guns here. You'd bring like
Zephyrum.
You bring maybe Zephyrum. Probably more likely the shooty ones, the Seraphim, just because they're cheaper. And like you don't need murder. You need just like points. So just like engage in all fronts, grab some objectives, raise some banners. All right. Again, we need to see the full list of restrictions. Maybe Army Renowns need to be single detachment or single army, in which case they can also splash an Inquisitor.
See, the reason why I don't think that's true is because if you look at like why would they have the line of text for the Death Guard one then?
That's true.
What do you mean?
Like why in the Death Guard one would they mention that your entire army must be Death Guard? If you
super fair. That's super fair. Yeah. Yeah. Also of note on this one, they do mention that this is like something that Metallica made famous, but then you can bring it from any detachment, so it doesn't have to be Metallica.
Right. But I would not be surprised with it comboing really well with what Metallica has going on.
Yep. That's a bit of foreshadowing there. I wouldn't be surprised if Metallica makes this like real good. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we just see the custom forge world with arc rifles just doesn't just like make this absurd until the new book comes out. With like the new AdMech book comes out and potentially takes that away.
Yeah.
Like what if they all just like, what if they're just like, all right, here's like 50 dudes, their guns all triple hit on 6s and double hit on 5s. Like, all right, well. And yes, that's true. All right, so Kevin, you've changed my mind. If we can bring like even just like 200 points of like something else, I think
it solves a lot of the problems. Did we talk about the stratagem? I was trying to check on something real quick. Well,
yeah, they get +1 on saves. They also have another stratagem for pick a unit in your deployment zone. It gets +1 hit in an enemy unit. But the AdMech actually have like 4 different ways of giving a unit +1 to hit with command points. So like giving them another one doesn't change anything. This does have a relic gun. It's not a good relic gun, but it is the best relic that AdMech have access to because oh my goodness, AdMech relics are so bad. So
just really quickly want to talk about bolster defenses because it has some lines of text that's like are kind of silly.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. It does do some pretty silly things.
So you pick an area terrain or an obstacle, which means like your tournament organizers have to be really clear what those are because like I could see some confusion with that. And it gains the light cover terrain feature, which means like there are some obstacles in area terrain that like might be very big and not really expected to gain the light cover terrain feature, and that's going to be big.
You're like this hill that covers half my deployment zone because it's just like a big cardboard cutout that just like goes on under the table under all the other terrain. Well, my whole deployment zone is covered now. Good luck, opponent.
I believe hills are not area terrains.
Okay,
area terrain would
never
be.
Mind.
Well, here's the thing.
No, you're.
I might make that mistake. That's one of the things. Like I could see someone like thinking that a hill is an area terrain because that's.
Yeah,
it's kind of very rules minutia.
Yeah, I will say the scary one I think is giving something that already gives light cover +2 on saves instead of +1 because at the end of the day you are playing AdMech. You can just sing Shroud Psalm and just get cover anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we are getting a little bit away from the main idea, which is like we'll have to see all of the rules for this before we can really make a call on like is this one good or bad. Kevin's convinced me to come down on the good side. I was so ready to be like, but actually you can only bring 4 units and they're slow and clunky, but no, never mind. All right. More importantly, how do we feel about this like general idea of like, all right, we're gonna like give you like 1 or 2 like heinous restrictions on your army, but then like here's some sweet rules that you can play with instead. Like
I like it because restrictions are what breeds creativity, and you know this isn't restriction for the sake of restriction. You're getting rewarded for it, and I think there's enough here where if you really want to, you can easily come up with a solid game plan and execute on it within the confines of these Armies of Renown. I think it's basically taking the best ideas of specialist attachments and formations and making them not broken. You know, like you get some, but you got to give some.
I think I look at this one and I'll be honest. I only realize now that you could mix things up, but like mix and match. But already here, I'm concerned because essentially we've taken an AdMech list, and we could still be an AdMech list that's like mono Mars, like for instance, right? And we just bring a patrol, and we put all our Cataphan Preachers in patrol, and we're saying for 2 CP, I'm getting this entire special rule set. That's it. That's the only cost.
Well, no, because this is still.
Oh, your army can include.
It's still your army, so you still can't be mono AdMech.
Fair enough.
This is not attachment. This is an army, so you would need to splash a second faction to get the bonuses.
Fair enough.
But yeah, the fact that you can splash out of this one, I hope they fix that.
It just further talks about like this might make because -1 damage is a very powerful rule
on 3-wound models, especially.
And I could see that like meaning that Cataphan Breachers need to get Cavern Beaches and Cavern French Warriors need to go up in points because of this attachment, which means that normal AdMech players are going to be losing units for something that they can't really play. And that's, I'd rather the detachment go up in costs. I'd rather the detachment start off by costing 10 points, and if we need to nerf it to like 50 points because it's that good, we can nerf it to 50 points.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention with this attachment too is Lucius Castellan robots as a fire base. The Lucius unique canonical is +1 on invulnerable saves. Castellan robots have a 5-up. If they're in defensive mode, they have a 4-up. Give them a +1 on invulnerable save. It's a 3-up invulnerable save with -1 damage taken. That we've seen that before. That profile doesn't go anywhere. It just actually doesn't die. It's a Lord of Change. It's just actually a Lord of Change. Except that there could be like 5 of them and they shoot real good. And then you can just like take that and be like, this is like a detachment. It's like a Skitarii patrol with this special army, and then the rest of my army is like a battalion of like whatever I want. I have an actually untouchable shooting platform, and I'm gonna play the rest of the game like a normal army. Alternatively, you could take that as a melee blob and just like push it at your opponent. Lucius can deep strike their robots. They're that like that.
Why not both?
That unit's just gonna like walk up the flank and just be like, all right, well, this is really bad for us. Like they're just gonna actually walk across the table. You can't stop them. Like shooting at them is a disaster. They're gonna get onto an opposing objective marker, which is another condition where they get the rule, and they're on it now, I guess. Like, what are you gonna do? Fight them? Yeah, we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like your whole army must be from AdMech in there, and they just like didn't put it on the spoiler article, in which case all these fears are kind of whatever. It'll be fine. Yeah, I think generally speaking, I like the idea of the restrictions to get bonuses.
I agree. Once again, if they balance it correctly, it's fine. I'm just concerned. Games Workshop, it's a very big game, and it's very easy to have like a slight slip up, and that can have cascading effects.
That's true. Really it is a very big if.
I guess my only other question then is like, what's the speed that you roll these out? Do you just roll them out to books as they come out? Do you roll them out to armies that don't have new books? It's so hard to write a specialist attachment for this is where I'm going to cut GW some slack, right? Like, I'm grumpy that we're getting new rules for armies that just got new rules, and we're like, why aren't our old armies getting rules? And like, it is the Vigilance problem, right? Like, you can't. It'd be very hard to make one of these books for like, I don't know, 1,000 Suns. Like, we're gonna give 1,000 Suns an attachment for their Terminators, or a specialist army for their Terminators. It'd be really hard to write that if I don't know what the 1,000 Suns Codex looks like, right? Like, I could like write something that's fine now and becomes a complete disaster when the 1,000 Suns Codex is written. And then you're in this situation where you're like, well, do we just like not make the 1,000 Suns Codex good because they already have this good detachment over here? Like, you don't want to make these books where you have to get rid of the book as the Codex comes out, so you're destroying rules. So in that sense, it's totally fair that GW is sticking to writing these books for armies that already have 9th edition releases. I get why they're doing it. It just, you know, the player in me that owns a 1,000 Suns army is just like sad, like, oh, cool, the 25th release for Imperium.
Doesn't feel good.
Yeah, but it's fair. I do think it's correct to do it this way rather than release rules that later either just like full on invalidate or like rewrite.
No, there's some sets of rules you could probably write that. I think you could write boring rules that wouldn't break anything. Like, you could probably write one where it's like, you have to play mono 1,000 Suns and only take Terminators, and then like it turns out that that's like enough of a restriction that like
the army like doesn't exist, right? It's like I have 30 Terminators, 3 Terminator Sorcerers. I haven't hit 2,000 points yet. Summon some demons, I guess.
And you could have some rules with it, like, because like if you look at this one, like, we don't know what the AdMech rules are going to be. We know it's coming soon, but like -1 damage is like, I have to imagine that like it's not interfering with like one of their new mechanics. Like I imagine something's changing in their book. It's probably not just going to be an 8th edition reprint.
Yeah.
But you can add that to the 8th edition version. You can probably add it to the 9th edition version.
Yeah, that's fair. But then we'll go back to what you said. -1 damage is real good, and it could be really scary with what's in their new.
That's why I said you have to either make it hyper restrictive or very boring. You could like, I don't know, like
This is hyper restrictive, right? This is cutting out like 80% of the models in the book.
Yeah.
This is also by the way, this is our detachment for like our old school AdMech players who like don't like the newfangled models. Like Skitarii cuts out all of the new releases. You can't play any of the new releases from their Psychic Awakening with this detachment. You just get to play the old cool things.
Which we know means GW wants it to be bad.
Oh no. But what if it's good? Yeah. So I guess my only last concern is that releasing these books now and not waiting for everything to be out and then releasing them does mean that we're going to see an even bigger gap between armies that have 9th edition rules and armies that don't. Because yes, these things are restrictive, they'll be different, but the new books are still just more power, right? Even if it ends up being not more power, it's just going to end up being more diversity in the lists that are of the good books, which as a list that you're already running as an underdog, it makes it even harder to target what's good in the meta, and it's just going to push armies that don't have 9th edition codexes even further down.
I agree.
All right.
I don't know if because I mean, like let's think about like, so Drukhari are getting a 9th edition release, and AdMech and Knights aren't. AdMech is fine, but not this version of AdMech. So we're not really. I don't know if we're actually going to change the needle much with them. And then Knights are bad, so we're bringing them up. Like there are probably some factions that if you were to release it, you could have that complaint. But like this exact release, I actually don't know if that's valid.
Well, yeah, sure. We don't know what's going to happen exactly, but what I'm trying to say, so like the Death Guard attachment, the Death Guard attachment ends up being like reasonable. We're going to see Death Guard lists that are just like 100 plus boxwalkers and like some Terminators and all infantry, and that's very different from the Death Guard army that's like 3 Plague Burst Crawlers and Mortarion. And as someone who's like running, I don't know, let's say someone plays like Chaos Space Marines, and they're just like, man, I need to beat that like Mortarion Plague Burst Crawler list. It's just kind of like tearing up the meta. Like I'm gonna bring a bajillion blast cannons, or like whatever. Like list diversity within top factions makes it very hard to play to build against them as someone who's playing a not top faction.
Right. I guess I thought you were more going with like, I'm thinking about like orcs in 8th edition where they were so late that like they were still an index when like the majority of factions had codexes that they felt very out of date. And I could see like that happening here where like we released 3 of these books, and once again orcs only has their 8th edition codex, doesn't have their 9th edition codex, doesn't have any of these new rules, so now they're just like once again playing with completely out of date rules. I thought that was more where you were going with that.
No, I was just going with like the more options you give top tier armies, the more different top tier builds we're going to see, and as the the top of the tier list sort of like gets wider, the people at the bottom are going to struggle more and more to like be the needle that can like actually like fit in there. Like
I agree though.
Like,
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I took it a different direction.
Gotcha. All right. I think that's all I had to say about this topic.
I briefly want to mention something.
Yeah, of course.
Man, we didn't get a single Drukhari thing, and then there's like 4 Drukhari releases in the same week. Like, it's amazing. They're getting a codex. They're getting this book. They're getting a battle force, a combat patrol. It's
a good set too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the combat patrol box is nuts.
It's thick. It's real thick. But literally, like, look at the box. It's a thick box.
Yeah, it's easily the biggest combat patrol box. It's like both probably by volume of plastic and actual volume of box. It's a big box. It's got 2 pirate ships in it. 2.
I wasn't expecting them to outdo the Beastclaw Raider box, but looking at it, that looks bigger than the Beastclaw Raider box. Chris is like, "What's Beast Claw Raiders?"
What is a Beast Claw Raider?
It's an AOS faction.
Oh,
Yeah, they're
have
ogres
a-
riding frost mounts.
I have an incredible Mutalith Vortex Beast. That's Kitch out of one that Kevin gave to me. All right. So that is everything I had to say on the topic.
same.
All right.
All right, cool.
So just a reminder, if that I am going to be TOing that event next April 10th. The email for the store and the Facebook page should be right there on your screen right now. Feel free to reach out. Full rules will be up this Saturday. I look forward to running some games for you guys. I know it's been some time since we've all played together. And with that, I have said my piece.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to this week's episode. This has been episode 35, 6 books for 1 army. We're streaming live every Wednesday night on Twitch at 7:30 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/3d6charge. We're also on YouTube where you can find VODs of this, and you can leave, likes, comments, subscribes, all that good stuff. I'd like to thank my contributors for this week's episode, Kevin Lieb and Benjamin Rubenstein. Bye for now, and don't roll any ones.